people still haven't figured out, whether the investment is worthwhile or not. Because
Mm.
when you think about weight loss, right, there's two parts to it. There's I've lost weight and I get down to the weight that I want to be at. And then it's like, well, then what do I do for the rest of my life? Because if you come off the drugs, you gain all of that weight back.
Yeah.
And so there is a big question when I talk to payers, or I talk to the Finnish government or the Swedish government or UAE, the Emirates. They're all like, look, we don't know whether the investment pays off yet or not
Mm.
from a longitudinal care perspective. And
Hmm.
so it's an important question to answer. And I think, that question certainly exists in the United States for all the various entities as well that pay for drugs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously cost is a big issue, and kind of getting that balance between,
Right.
cost and benefit is a key,
Yep.
it's a key item, which, kind of
You got it, man.
lobs the ball into Vivus's court, because
Right.
you've got something that makes a lot more sense on the financial side.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny because we've actually had a lot of data that's come out recently. So you sent over the Cleveland report, right?
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, we kind of all expected to see that when we read through the clinical trials, particularly that Lilly did. They had a very, very large South American population
Okay.
in the trial design,
Yeah.
and the trial was well designed, well thought out, as you'd expect from Lilly and the Lilly product. But the uh, the completer rates, what we call completer rates, were much higher than you would see for a U.S. based population,
Okay.
particularly for a non-mandatory therapy that a patient was on. And so we thought, just our reading of it is, they're probably going to have higher abandonment rates than in the U.S. population
Hmm.
than you would see in that trial, and that certainly proved to be the point, from the Cleveland Clinic analysis. And then I think the other thing too is that, and we see this in Europe quite a bit, and we as well in the Middle East, is that patients, because of the side effect profile, are having a tough time getting up to those high dose. Not everybody can get to those high dose,
Sure.
15 milligram trizepatides, 10 milligram trizepatide, and 2.4 milligram Wegovy. And so they're titrating down quite a bit,
Hmm.
and they're using, the auto pen, auto injectors. So they're not getting, they have the brand name Wegovy or the brand name Mounjaro slash Zepbound, and so they're on the drug, but their performance is well below it because they're using a much lower dose of the therapy.
Yeah.
So not surprising, and I think the hype of the marketplace has now physicians are actually seeing, and so for us it's actually been a good story because what it really does is it allows physician. We don't have head-to-head data, but there's a lot of a meta-analysis that shows like we're actually the best drug for 5% weight loss.
Hmm.
We're
Hmm.
probably the best drug for 10% weight loss,
Hmm.
and this was a study that was published by Wiley at the American Obesity Society at the end of 2024. So I'll share that with you. But it's now it's like people have like calmed down, and people are like, and doctors have kind of calmed down, and they've survived the onslaught of patients asking for this, and now they're getting back to a better medical decision.
Well, another shift that I think is kind of along the lines of that is that the focus has been, I think, more on side effects now than percent weight
Yeah,
loss.
yeah,
Viking had some data just a short time ago, and the stock sold
yep,
off pretty severely, even though I think the weight loss percentage was in line with what people were expecting. And what I
right.
was reading was that I think investors were concerned with the safety profile and the side effect profile of the drug, and that's why there was such a violent reaction. So I don't know if you have any take on that, and kind of in terms of the shift of the market and what they're looking for in the space. The trade-off between side effects versus percent weight loss.
Well, and I think you look at it as you know, you know, like tirzepatide 15 milligram. It's an awesome drug. I mean, it is. It's a brilliant drug. which is weird for a competitor to say, right? But it's, I want obesity to work in total, but what people are finding is that that's an awesome drug for a small subset of the population.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of the side effect profile. That GI profile is tough.
Yeah.
Set aside the expense and all of that other stuff. It's got a tough profile to it, and it's well understood now, and it's much better understood now. And then if you look at just I think people are becoming more mature about evaluating weight loss products, because it used to just be, us and Mysimba or Contrave in the US, Mysimba overseas. Then you had Saxenda came out. Saxenda, pretty good drug, but not a great weight loss, but a lot of marketing hype behind it. And then then you had Wegovy come out with semaglutide, another great drug, works really well, high dose, pretty tough side effect profile. And then Mounjaro, Zepbound came out, and so now you have a pretty comprehensive tool set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so when you look at that tool set, how much better is it going to get with all of this new development? That's a pretty valuable question to ask.
Sure. Well, I think there's another issue, which is from the population management perspective. And,
yeah.
You've got to make sure if you prescribe these drugs that the patients are going to stay on them and actually get the benefit, right? If you're going to pay for them. So discontinuation, that's a big issue. If you're feeling nauseous and, you're not feeling good in this area right here, you may just stop the drug, and then, you'll never get the benefit.
It's interesting with our therapy. We have patients who stayed on it for 8 or 9 years, and what they do, and they work this out with their physician. And certainly we don't sell and market against this, but the thing that's interesting is, anecdotally, we see patients who've been on therapy for a very long time and just kind of use it as a maintenance dose. And I think I think that's a gap in the science that exists in the world of weight loss right now, is that we all know how to get a patient to a point where they've lost all the weight that they want to lose. Right. We know how to do that.
But the problem is
we don't know what are they going to do for the rest of their life.
Right. How once they reach it, do they maintain it? Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And we haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah. And that kind of, that was kind of the genesis behind that Cleveland Clinic thing that I sent on,
great study.
That patients stop taking it, they don't get the benefit.
Nope.
And, real world data just isn't as good as what was in the, what was in the clinical trials. So.
And that's certainly happens. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. It hasn't been an issue with us. The other thing too is that when we did our studies, they were over a shorter time period. So they were kind of 56-week studies as opposed to 72-week studies. And so, Lilly and Novo did a good job of designing a study where they were going to be able to pull really interesting marketing points out of it. But when you look at, we would absolutely love a head-to-head study, our drug versus all the GLP-1s,
sure.
Like a 3-arm study.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. I don't know that Novo and Lilly want to do that, but we would love it.
Well, I don't think I've asked you this before, and I don't know if you have the have there been any studies done showing how long it takes to kind of reach that terminal weight loss, kind of that maximum amount that you're going to reach?
So it's an interesting question. So we've shown kind of maximum weight loss and where people will plateau, right? Mm-hmm. I think the study that hasn't been done, at least in my opinion, is where a doctor and a patient sit down and say, well, here's what your target weight should be for the person and how you want to live your life. So if you take a patient with a BMI of 39, ideally if you can get them down to 30, that's a 30% weight loss effectively, or a little bit more than that. That would be, an interesting point. And no one's done the study that says, okay, we established a targeted weight loss, and the number of patients that achieved and maintained their targeted weight loss is X percent. and here's the
After a certain time
mechanisms
period or something.
after a certain time period. Yeah, and it'd be nice to see like almost like a 3-year study or a 5-year study.
Okay, I
of
mean,
that, and
but
that hasn't
does
been
it take
done.
like
But
a year to get to that
so you'll
kind
see
of
patients.
plateau?
Yeah, it depends, right?
Okay, so it
Some
varies a
some
lot.
patients get their it's highly variable. Diet, exercise, sleep.
Sure, I guess commitment to weight
Yeah,
loss.
there's a lot of commitment to it. There's
Yeah.
a lot of other things. Like we did a Mayo study during COVID. Actually, started it during COVID. And internally we refer to it as that magic pill study. And, because the idea was like you sit on a couch, take a pill, see how much weight it lose, like almost no exercise, right?
Yeah.
And people lost 14% of their weight.
Hmm.
Right. The study will publish at some point, but it was, it was pretty, that was over a year.
And that was for Qsymia and or who were the
Yeah, it was
participants?
Qsymia. Yeah.
Just
Qsymia mid
Qsymia?
dose. Just Qsymia
Yeah,
mid
okay.
dose.
Got it.
And we'd love to see it with Qsymia high dose. But Mayo, Dr. Andres Acosta, who runs Mayo's obesity practice, he uses a lot of Qsymia, so they're not contraindicated, and we've heard this from a number of pediatricians as well because we're pediatric approved, and so you'll see kind of the concomitant therapy where they'll use low dose GLP-1s or liraglutide or semaglutide or trizepatide, and then they'll use our product. Hasn't been studied, but it's a pretty interesting thing. So there's a lot more work that can be done, and I think there's some really good experiments that need to be done. I'm probably less enamored with new products, and I'm probably more interested in how do we use the existing, obviously, how do we use the existing products to achieve this long-term healthy, durable weight loss? That's what we refer to it, healthy, durable weight loss, because that's ultimately what I think what society is looking for and individuals are looking for.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You got it, man.
So how has Qsymia been doing recently? Any
So
highlights on performance?
Yeah. So we have generic competition in the United States. And normally when you have generic competition, so it was a paragraph 4 settlement. So Dr. Reddy's and Teva are both in the marketplace.
Oh, okay. So
normally they've been on the market for about 3 months. We're well ahead of where we should be from a product penetration perspective. So we're just still doing very, very well. We're seeing it erode, but it's eroding slowly. But our drug also isn't really expensive.
Right. And that was what I was going to ask you. The price differential isn't the same as probably other branded versus generic. So
no, it's not like $1,000 branded price and $50 generic or $100 generic. We actually see the generic more expensive in some markets than our product. Because you can buy it for $98 mail order and all day long, and we've had that price for quite a while. And so our mail order business is rock steady. And then in Europe, so we're in 6 countries, 5 of which we're commercialized in. We have another 13 countries that have been recently approved, and we'll commercialize those over the next year. We're in the Middle East and UAE, and all the territories are growing slower than we would like, but they're all growing pretty rapidly.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So we think we would like to grow faster. We think we should be growing faster. But at the end of the day, like Poland is basically doubling month over month now. And that's summertime. And so people kind of take a break from weight loss and in the summer,
weight loss is a
party and
thing,
drink.
right?
Yeah, it's March. It's March.
Or March.
Everybody goes and everybody, makes their New Year's resolution
after they step
January. January they like, I need to lose weight. February they work out. By the end of February they've quit their gym and they're like, give me a drug, doctor.
Right, exactly.
Exactly. It's funny because it's just the same curve every year.
That's funny. Well, I saw you guys also got into the Costco pharmacy.
Yeah, we've been there for a
Is
little
that
while.
US only? I don't know. Actually, I don't even know if Costco has pharmacies internationally, but I know they have a
I don't know. Yeah, so we have a great relationship with Costco. We're actually going to have some more news that comes out about Costco here in a couple of weeks. I'm pretty excited about that as well too. So yeah,
okay.
good stuff.
On Costco, do they offer the generic version as well, or I don't know how
Um,
pharmacy works.
well, I think we priced it in such a way that nobody needs to take the generic. How
Okay,
about that?
that's what I was figuring. I mean, you think
Right.
Costco, you're going to get a good price if you're,
Yeah, yeah. And we want people to be on branded drugs. We think that's a better call. It's we actually have all the safety data. It's really our
and you've
drug.
been doing it longer,
Uh,
right? You've been making it
yeah,
longer.
we've been doing a lot of yeah. I mean, to be honest, we're probably like funny thing in South Korea we're the number one oral. In the United States we're the number one branded oral.
Huh.
And I always joke about this, but I think there's some truth behind it. Is if Elon Musk had been on Qsymia as opposed to Ozempic, our fortunes would be completely different.
Yeah, well, that would have been a good way to get it in front
Yeah,
of people.
yeah, and I think he would have been healthier too, my opinion. But I'm not a doctor. I'm
We
not a
won't go
doctor.
there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You guys have more than just Qsymia. I think you've got 4 other compounds in your pipeline for
Yeah,
PAH, bone marrow
yeah,
transplant, diabetes.
yeah.
How are those doing?
So diabetes. So the two insulin products we're there. Those are kind of we're waiting for some tariff, China, all of that stuff to kind of
Okay.
settle out. So that'll settle out at some point, and then we'll figure out what to do.
But I guess they're
They're
still
very
in development, so even if you did kind of
yeah.
continue with them, it wouldn't really affect it that much, right? Or would
No, no, no. But we're kind of taking a
Okay.
little bit of a break too
Okay.
on that. PAH we're really excited about. So patients, um, we are going to start enrolling patients in Q1 of next year.
Okay.
Multi-country, 90 centers across the globe.
Okay.
Um, really excited about that product. It's a 505(b)(2). We have compassionate use data. We partnered with, I don't know if I can actually say their name, but we partnered with a fabulous university in the United States, and really excited about that program. So, yeah, we're in the process. We've manufactured clinical materials for the clinical trial, and we're going through some final contracting. The protocol's been approved by the FDA. The trial's approved by the FDA. It's pivotal, and we're with the success of Merck's products, sotatercept, Winrevair is the branded name.
Hmm.
We're kind of what we would call a second generation of that product,
Okay.
and so we're
So does
really
that other
excited for
product have some
patients.
shortcomings, I guess, that you can
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd call it shortcomings. I don't know if I'd
maybe
use
side
that.
effects that are
Yeah, it's got
temporary or something like
it
that?
has a side effect profile that I think we address in our product.
Okay.
But the data's got to come out, and before we can make a claim like that, right?
Sure. Sure.
Yeah. So, but so we got 3-4 years of work to do, but excited about that work and feel pretty good about it. The
Okay.
carmustine product is so it's a reformulation. So we're changing the diluent from ethyl alcohol to propylene glycol,
Hmm.
and so it changes. It's used in bone marrow transplant for what is called beam therapy. So
Okay.
these are patients in a refractory setting who've kind of failed other opportunities or other therapies, but it's a well understood, well known therapy. Carmustine is also used in glioblastoma, and so because we're changing this formulation, we've got about 25% of the trial enrolled.
Okay.
So far so good. But we're excited to get the readout on that trial down the road.
Yeah, I was doing some reading for some other drugs, and when there's alcohol in the in the mix there, that
Yeah.
there's a number of patients that can't use it. I guess that was probably one of the reasons you switched over.
Yeah, it's also the infusion time was very long,
Oh, really? So
and
it changed
and
the kind of
yeah,
the
so yeah, so
viscosity of it?
we
Is that what it did, or
no, it's
no?
actually because what you're doing is you're actually injecting 10% straight alcohol into the human's bloodstream. So you have to do that over an extended period
Okay,
of
right.
time.
So still, it kind of goes back to that intolerance
Right.
to alcohol, because I know there's a proportion of patients that they're just very alcohol sensitive
Oh yeah, absolutely,
and
absolutely. But yeah, no, yeah. It's a really interesting program, and by changing the diluent, we think we can expand. The drug itself has a pretty good indication, for from a use perspective. And so we changed the goal of the trial is to demonstrate um, bioequivalency with using basically a 30-minute infusion time
Mhm.
versus a 2-hour infusion time plus an overnight stay in a hospital. So you had to do both. So we removed the hospital stay and we shortened the infusion time.
Okay,
So that's what
that's a big deal.
we're
Yeah,
aiming to solve.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very cool.
I mean,
Good
the
stuff. And
hospitals,
then
they're always
yeah,
looking
we
to
have
cut costs.
and then we have pancreas, which competes with AbbVie's products and Nestle's product. We're a distant third in the marketplace, but small but mighty. That's what we say.
Has the pancreas market share been pretty steady over the years? I know we've been
Ye-
talking about this since way pre-COVID, actually.
Yeah,
I'm
so
just
so
wondering how
we've
it's been
done
over those years.
yeah. So we've done very well in commercial. We exited Medicaid
Mhm.
because of the way the Inflation Reduction Act had some really draconian rebate
Requirements, yeah. Okay.
yeah, requirements around it. And because of the way our drug is going flowed through the market, used to be owned by Johnson and Johnson, and now it's owned by us. And so that created like the Inflation Reduction Act rebate. Once they finally implemented all the pieces of it, we would have been paying people to take the drug.
Hmm.
That's effectively the way the
So
economics
that
work.
should really improve your margins getting out of that market then.
Yeah, and so yeah, it was a massive improvement in our margins. It's unfortunate, right? Because it's you want administrations to do good things, absolutely. But that law was sort of uh, I don't want to say it was absurd, but
It seemed like it had some unintended consequences
yeah. That's a better way to put it. It was just like, what? You're doing what to us? And, we're a small pharma company, right? So, we
Well,
have to
I
compete
think those
against the Abbeys.
patients, and I did some work on that market,
Yeah.
the pancreas market. I think that patients get used to a certain brand or a certain
Mhm.
mix of
Yeah.
that product,
Enzymes.
and it's
Yep.
difficult, yeah, to change.
Yeah.
Um, is that right? And then
There's
so it's good to
definitely,
have a choice.
yeah, there's no reason why a patient can't move. Um, there isn't a clinical reason. All three of the products are roughly identical.
Okay.
They're
Okay.
not AB substitutable. Let me put it, I want to make that very
Okay.
clear.
But okay.
But in the eyes, if you talk to a physician, they'll be like, there's each one of them has their slight nuances.
Hmm.
And so I think that's always, pretty interesting. What you do see with the cystic fibrosis patients, they kind of stay on the same drug forever,
Okay.
because they basically day one of their lives, they start taking enzymes.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And so with, people who have acute pancreatitis, um, they can switch, but, physician's choice. And we present our case and then allow the physicians to make the choice that they want.
Okay. Well, one of the as we both know, one of the biggest issues recently has been the tariffs.
Yeah.
It's kind of dominated the headlines and kind of left a lot of uncertainty. And I think at first we thought that it wouldn't affect pharmaceuticals because I think there's some law in place that prevented that. But it looks like there's going to be a 15% tariff now. And you mentioned you may change some of your development activities
Right.
to tariffs. And I'm just wondering, what are some of the implications for U.S. companies and consumers of those. And the first one that comes to mind is, there's a lot of patients on a lot of generic products, like the
Yeah.
standards, like for Lipitor, or blood pressure medication.
Statins. Yep. Yep. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
and
Yeah.
if there's a tariff on that, that's just going to get passed directly through, because there's not a lot of margin on those generic products, right? I mean, they're already at like razor thin margins. So
Right.
that's the consumer side. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on kind of the business side, and also the consumer side, if you have any thoughts on that, about the implications of this after after they've been in place for a while.
Yeah. All good questions, and I think so. Pharmaceutical supply chain is typically very complicated, so it's very global. So take Qsymia, for example. The manufacturing process takes us probably across 6 countries, right? So between we have 2 APIs, we have excipients, we have capsules, we have paper, we have bottles, and so when you kind of take the build of materials of a pharmaceutical, I've seen them, probably the most complex pharmaceutical that I've worked with in my life probably had 15 different countries contributing to, technology components, whatever it was, to that product before you ended up, and this was a sterile fill finish vial product. And then you have the added component of, it's very difficult from a regulatory perspective to just swap out a vendor.
Oh, right. Yeah, because you got to get
Right.
FDA clearance on all those
Right.
manufacturing
Yeah. So,
facilities,
and
make
that
sure
can
they're
take as long
GMP.
as, yeah, that can take as long as 2 to 3 years. Or if
Yeah.
you want to move your manufacturing location from one location to another, you do a thing called tech transfer. And a tech transfer is expensive from a monetary perspective, and it's all expensive from a time perspective. So it takes a couple of years. And so as a pharma manufacturer, you have to ask yourself, this kind of complex question of, okay, am I just going to eat the price? Am I going to pass the price along? Am I going to try to optimize to this new set of, this new reality that I face? And so it's a pretty complicated question, and it's much more complicated than I think people, want to, fully acknowledge.
Well, John, another element that comes to mind is that,
Yeah,
you have a set amount of capacity in the US. If
right.
an incremental customer comes along, you're not going to probably get a lower price, right? Because first of all, maybe
No,
it's forced. And second of
right,
all, they may be already kind of at capacity, or, not really looking for business the way someone else
right,
might be. And
right,
so that right there could be the amount of the tariff, in terms of
right,
increased
right.
costs. So,
Yeah,
um, as you said, unintended consequences. That's the one
yeah,
that kind
yeah,
of comes to my mind right now.
yeah, yeah. Look, and at least I've been doing this for 30 years. Every administration has its new set of rules, and healthcare is so important, and pharma expenditures are very large in the United States. 18 to 20% of the total healthcare expenditures. So it's a big deal. So and I think everybody's trying to get to good answers. Every administration, you can look at it and you're like, oh, all right, I understand why they're doing what they're doing. Like, I don't have a problem with that. It's just, I think the it just creates a lot of complexity that
Yeah, that
um
hasn't been thought through, and that
that
really
hasn't been
can't be
thought
thought
through.
through.
And yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and it's very difficult to think through it. And
yeah,
each individual drug has its own complexities.
yeah.
So, so you sit there and you kind of go, all right, well, I'll eat the price on that one. I'll pass the price along. I'll figure out how to optimize supply chain. I'll go through some tech transfer. Um, so it doesn't necessarily remove cost from the system. It kind of just changes things.
So at a 15% tariff rate, I mean, after all this that we just covered right now, it almost seems
Yeah,
like
yeah,
just accept the 15% and go with it, because all of that time, all of that effort, and probably higher cost too, it just doesn't make sense to to kind of change what you're doing. It's already established.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think at 50% it's different. At 15%,
Yeah.
it's a little different. So look, I think hopefully a year from now, we're not talking about tariffs all the time. Everything's kind
Yeah.
of stabilized. All the trade agreements are in place.
You used to live in Texas, near me,
I
and
did,
you
yeah,
also live in
yeah,
California.
yeah,
And I thought I'd
yeah.
point out just some of the efforts that have been made here in Texas to expand the life sciences. There have been a lot of grants. We have CPRIT here, which is on the oncology side, helps companies make
Super
early
cool program.
investments
Yeah,
into oncology drugs and
yeah,
devices. We also got the Texas some Texas stock exchanges. There's actually three of them that are being talked about, and I think the NYSE moved some of their
yeah.
operations here. And so with that as a background, I'd love to hear your thoughts, living in both areas. How the biotech, life
Not
sciences.
not a not a volatile topic at all. Um, no,
Well,
it's
yeah, but
funny.
if you look
I
around the last 20 years, there have been so many companies that have moved from California to Texas. I mean, um, Toyota was one of them. I mean, in all different industries. We had
yeah,
Schwab was another one. They moved from the Bay Area,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
mean, I'm
to
just
South
scratching
Lake.
the
Yeah,
surface. You look up
yeah,
to Dallas and Plano and some of those other areas. There's probably 10 or 15 S&P 500 companies or top 500 US companies that have moved into this area. And
yeah.
it's really changed
It's
the investment opportunities. And then with the kind of the layer on of the biotech, the biotech investments. I think there was a $4 billion investment in Plano and some kind of biotech hub up there. And then there's the
mhm,
Pegasus Park. I don't know if you've heard about that, but that's
mhm,
really
sure.
emerged in recent years. So it's really changed a lot. So, from your perspective, having lived in both areas and being familiar with
Yeah,
both, what do you think of the changes and what does it mean for, the strength of biotech in these two states?
yeah. So there's so I have a saying. In order to build a successful healthcare company, you have to do business in five. You have to be successful doing business in 5 states:
Hmm.
Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, Texas, and California.
Okay.
Right. And so as a business owner, and then and then California is the largest market, period, in the United States. And everybody talks about how much tax they pay. They actually pay the most in federal tax too, by a margin of 2 to 1.
Oh, right, because of
So
income. Yeah, higher income.
yeah, so California residents, like in 2024, paid $800 billion in taxes, and Texas residents paid about 420 billion in federal
Oh,
taxes.
really? So it's almost
Yeah,
twice as much. Wow. Interesting.
yeah, yeah. So so California is this incredibly wealthy state. Um, it has complexities around doing business there, but I love doing business in California because that's where a lot of my customers are.
Mm-hmm.
I love doing business in Texas because that's where a lot of my customers are.
Mm-hmm.
So, when there is this kind of, there is a drumbeat, certainly California's bad, California's bad, California's bad. The reality is it's not crime ridden. It's a lot of those issues. I was a longtime San Francisco resident. It was kind of really bad in 2017, but if you look at the city now, it's much, much better.
Hmm.
When I lived in Dallas, you drive through certain parts of Dallas and you're like, holy shit.
Yeah, I
Or,
mean, there's
sorry, I'm not
elements of
supposed to
that
swear.
that
Right,
here that
right.
are
And
in
you go to
Los
Houston.
Angeles and
Yeah, you go to Los Angeles, you go to Chicago, you go to
yeah.
New York, you go to certain parts of Florida. So it's kind of this, there's what people talk about from a hype perspective, then there's what is reality. And the reality is, if you're not, I don't care what business you're in, if you're not successful in California or Texas,
Hmm.
you probably don't
You're
have
probably
a
not
successful.
successful.
So yeah, you just aren't. You certainly don't have a national scale business, and you have to do business in Florida, you have to do business in New York, and you have to do business in Pennsylvania. And because over half the population of the United States, roughly half the population of the United States, lives in those 5 states.
Hmm. Really? Okay.
Yeah.
What's number six? I'm trying to think of number
Um,
six.
I don't even know.
Yeah, that's a good
Um,
question. Georgia, maybe?
yeah, but maybe Georgia, maybe Illinois.
Oh yeah, like
Um,
the Chicago, the Great Lakes area, right? But
yeah,
they've been
yeah.
losing a lot of population. I mean, that's where
So Yeah, yeah, yes and no. It's like when you look at it, there's a lot of people moving from Texas to California. I think, Texas became, when I was there, became much, much more expensive. Um,
True.
and
Yeah. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
and so that was, and then the property taxes are really expensive in Texas, but, I live in Nevada now, so I think I live in the best place. So, but but all of the states, they all have their, quirks and differences, and but ultimately, California is very important to my business. Texas is very important to my business. And I think, I think Texas, when I originally moved there, it was to kind of kickstart, of the, what I call the third coast, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
right. And, there's Boston, tons of drug development there, San Francisco, San Diego, tons of drug development there, really innovative. And the goal was around MD Anderson, which I was on the scientific advisory board there, was to really kind of drive, a third coast of drug development.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tons of brilliant science in Texas, tons of it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and stuff that comes out, if you look at immunotherapy, it came out of MD
Yeah, I
Anderson.
mean, I think almost every clinical trial in oncology probably has a site at MD Anderson. I mean, I've come across it all the time on clinical
Oh
trials.
yeah, yeah, I know.
I
It's
mean, you
it's
look for
if you think,
any oncology trial, it's got a presence there pretty much.
yeah, and if you look at the five best medical schools or the five best oncology fellowships, there's probably more. It's probably the top 10. It's Stanford, it's UCLA, it's UCSF, it's UT Southwestern,
Hmm.
it's MD Anderson, it's
Hmm.
Sloan Kettering,
Hmm.
it's Emory, and it's Fred Hutch up in Washington. So setting aside all of the politics and stuff, just trying to get to good foundational fundamental science, there's 10, 12 places that you go, or the 55, 52, whatever the right number is. All the NCI cancer centers are amazing. You know, Barnes Jewish out of St. Louis, amazing place. There is this kind of, you know, I think for those of us in the pharma industry, Texas is awesome. California is awesome. Massachusetts is awesome. If you want to build a pharma company, any one of those three places is a good place to do it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of companies probably have a main headquarters somewhere and then another
Yeah,
office,
yeah,
somewhere else. Like, maybe Dallas, San Francisco, and Boston, right? You just have a presence in each.
yeah, absolutely. Like look at Toyota, right? Toyota moved their headquarters to to Plano or Frisco,
Yeah.
but all of their design work is still done in California.
Hmm.
So
Well, which is the car market capital of the world, right? So,
absolutely, like absolutely. It's funny because when Tesla moved,
right, there's
you kind
another
of
one,
like,
right?
yeah, a huge company, right?
Which is
Amazing
an
company.
interesting. I wonder how that'll. That's a whole different topic, but
Yeah,
we
yeah,
want to
yeah.
move to an area where there's a lot of antipathy towards electric cars. And I don't know if you knew this, but just this year, if you
Yeah.
own an all electric car, they hit you with another $200 fee on
Oh,
top
I
of
didn't know
the
that in
register. Yeah.
Texas.
So
Yeah,
as an aside there,
yeah. No, well, it's funny too because
that's their
Texas is
reward
all
for
down.
moving here.
Yeah, yeah. But I think one of the funny things I always found about Texas is Texas is the wind power capital of the United
Hmm.
States.
Right, right, right.
Right,
Exactly.
right. But and then and they do there's a bunch of petroleum plants that use wind power to run their electrical operations.
Yeah,
So
right.
so there's what people talk about in the politics, and then there's look at the math of
The
what the
reality
world
of
is
it.
really going on. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I would say.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
just the wind power and the solar power are really increasing. I kind of keep track of that stuff,
Do
and
you?
the solar installs have been, pretty big here as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, like dude, when I lived in Texas, solar was like growing like gangbusters because you have during certain parts of the year, you have 9 hours of productive sunlight.
Oh yeah, yeah. You can
Yeah,
produce more than you use easily.
yeah, for sure.
So,
Yeah,
the other topic I thought of interest would be M&A,
yeah,
because that's always a topic of interest. I think it's always interesting to see where deals are made, and we had this this patent cliff coming up with a lot
Yeah,
of
a lot of
well-known
product,
drugs.
a lot of
Keytruda
products.
comes to
Yeah,
mind, but there's like I should have had a list of them, but there's 7 or 8 more
yeah,
that all recognize that by
yeah,
2030 will be gone. And
yep,
all the big pharmas have a patent cliff to address.
yep,
And so they need to do something, either develop it internally or go to M&A.
right,
So that's one reason I was trying to keep track of M&A. So I took a look, updated as of today. So maybe it doesn't
yep,
include the deals in the last few days, but if they don't capture them, but it looks like we're slightly ahead in terms of the value of the deals, and the value includes a lot of future amounts, right?
right.
So it's a little bit distorted maybe in terms of what may actually come about, but I think I have so here's the number. So 86.1 billion of deals announced to date, and that's 94 deals. And then last year it was 81.2. So we're just in the single digit percent increase in terms of dollars.
Yeah,
96 deals were announced, so it's about the same. Oncology was a big area, as always.
always is. Yeah,
It's always
always
there.
is.
But I thought I'd ask you kind of your thoughts, if you had a chance to look at some of the deals and some of the deals that stood out to you, that have happened so far this year, and kind of what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's it's kind of interesting that people are still going so not gangbusters. This is a slower deal year. If you look at the last 4 years compared to kind of pre-COVID, we're definitely still have never picked up to those paces.
Yeah.
From my perspective, I think there's some very, very large deals that have been signed this year, and it's not really the space that I'm in. I
Yeah.
spend a lot of time in, I always call it, there's the major leagues of pharma, and I stepped out of the major leagues of pharma on purpose. And I like the smaller deals, and so I focus a lot on smaller companies. Technology licensing, is certainly interesting. There's been a lot in the obesity space,
Yeah.
that's been going on from a development perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't I don't think that that's going to continue, because some of the things that we talked about earlier, and the fact that you know we still have a couple of big questions that need to be answered in obesity.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the company that figures out long-term durable healthcare with a true maintenance therapy, whether it's Lilly, Novo, My Drug, whomever, Viking, there's Boehringer has a pretty decent portfolio in that space. I know Pfizer's got a drug that they're working through. One failed, one is still in process. But I expect over the next couple of years to see a lot more of these smaller new technology companies getting much bigger ticketed, deals, biodollar deals. Um, and then the other thing that will be interesting is there's been quite a bit of trimming of kind of national lab government-based funding, with the current administration, and and that I don't know whether it's good or bad. There's a lot of people who are, oh my God, it's horrible, and there's other people who are like, what were we really getting out of that development anyway? Was it really generating taxpayer return? I don't know. I'm not smart enough to answer that question, but I do know that there's going to be, with AI is going to be a big piece of this.
Mm-hmm.
That we're seeing crazy valuations for AI based companies. I don't know what that means. To be honest, it's like I still think AI is kind of a parlor trick, but I could easily be wrong on
Well,
that.
the thing about AI that people don't realize is that AI just pulls together human generated information, right?
Right,
You can't have AI without human content, because it doesn't
right,
to pull from, unless it's just making stuff up, which it
right. Yeah,
does in a lot of
which it
cases.
does. Yeah. Well, and I've just read a couple of articles recently. I'm not sure if it's the same article being regurgitated, but a lot of these like kind of business focused AI programs, 95% of them aren't hitting their goals. And I
Yeah.
remember, like,
Yeah.
if you go back to the CRMs, remember all the customer relationship management applications that came out like kind of in the early 2000s? Everybody was installing a CRM, everybody was building a new CRM, and it was going to make customer care magical. It kind of sounds like the AI bots and all the customer
Yeah.
care AI bots. Um, and so I don't know, but I do think that and I have come across one company, and unfortunately I can't mention the name, but I have come across one company that has figured out some stuff in AI.
Well, one of the
And
problems with drug development in AI is it takes so long to actually figure out if it improved your probability of success, right?
right,
Because
right,
you can't, you have to still run human trials.
right.
And maybe it can help you run them more efficiently. I mean, I think AI, when it's used to
There
identify
you go.
patients, that's a pretty useful thing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and
And
there's
I've
also,
seen some projects in that.
yeah, that's and that's a great way to do it, because populating trials is an expensive and problematic thing. So if you can
Yeah.
improve that, and I can see how it could do it easily. You
Well,
see
and it and
the,
and it's not just identifying the patient, it's also recruiting patients.
yeah, okay,
So that
sure.
recruitment process, and certainly social media is a big part of trial recruitment,
Hmm.
particularly for, more complex diseases, because sometimes, a lot of those complex diseases in the trials are at centers of excellence.
Uh-huh.
And, if you're not within 50 miles,
Right.
you're definitely not getting identified, or, being able to be pushed to that trial, which is unfortunate. So that's something that we need to get better at that.
Yeah. And well, another thing about the AI trend is that the FDA is getting involved in it too. Uh,
Sure.
they have, I think it's called ELSA. Not sure if that's the right
Mm-hmm.
way to say it. ELSA. I don't know what it
Yeah.
stands for,
Yeah.
but I guess they've got that system in place to help review applications, drug applications,
Yeah.
which makes a lot of sense. I mean, I talked to a lot of old timers in the industry, and that doesn't include you, of course. You're fresh in
Um,
the industry.
yeah. Yeah.
But they remember the old days when there were paper applications, and they say, yeah, it was like a semi-trailer truck
Yeah.
semi-trailer tractor trailer full of
Yeah.
paper. And
Yeah.
there's no way that a human can digest all that information and find what they need. And a lot of the CRLs that I've heard, that I've got feedback on, was really they just couldn't find what they needed. It was there. It's just the FDA couldn't find it. So they needed to send it back, and then so I think in that respect, being able to find the information, be able to do the checklist to make sure everything's there, and accept the application is I see a lot of benefit to be had there. And I think they may expand its use a little bit more, but I'd love to hear what you think about that, and if you think it has the same benefit.
Yeah. So I'm always a fan of trying to make things more efficient, right? Because a lot of the time frame, and when you have a drug and the drug works and it's passed through its clinical trial and you're comfortable with the data and the data has been validated, you know, that 6 month lag time from submission to where you actually start getting feedback from a review perspective,
Mm-hmm.
you'd love to be able to shorten that. And so anything that the FDA can do to accelerate that review period and get to a feedback loop,
Yeah.
um, because and I think the other thing too is that, you know, pharma has this kind of tendency to vilify the FDA sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
too bureaucratic, too administratively difficult, all of that stuff. I've got 38 drugs approved with the FDA of various forms, ANDAs, branded, non-branded. And I've never had an interaction with the FDA where I was like, oh, I don't understand what they're doing. Like it's always been very productive. They're really professional. If you have a good drug and they believe in your product, they will shine the light on the ground to say, you should think about this, or you should think
Mm-hmm.
about
Yeah,
this.
be very
They don't
helpful.
advise
Yeah.
you or consult you, but they're very, very helpful. And that's been my experience almost, you know, in 22 years of, I've been in the industry for 30, but really dealing with the FDA off and on for 2 years. And quite honestly, most of the regulatory bodies across the globe, with the exception of one, which we'll name unmentioned, is very reasonable. Like they're just, they're reasonable conclusions and reasonable processes. Um, and so to be able to take, the 30,000 pages of an NDA and digest those and make it easier for the administrative teams and the review teams to get through that. Because, those teams will number up to 15, 16 people,
Yeah.
and they're
Well, they
all
have to.
busy.
No one person could ever
Yeah,
read through
no,
30,000
no, no.
pages.
The manufacturing part of it, the clinical side of
Yeah,
it, the
exactly.
biostatistics, it's a wildly complex process. The flip side is I've seen enough of scientific based AI to where I wouldn't trust it with public health decisions yet.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as the FDA is using it to augment and not replace, that it's used as, the human is here and the AI tool is here
Yeah,
and the human is validating it,
yeah,
I'm comfortable with it.
yeah.
There's a lot of people who believe so deeply in AI
Mm.
that they're willing to replace very important human jobs with it. I'm not there, man.